Prime Minister, let's start on an issue that has dominated this country this year and continues to do so, that of judicial reforms. You've currently put the reforms on pause whilst you try and seek a compromise. Looking back at the first few months of this year now, do you accept that perhaps you went a bit too hard, a bit too fast?
God, I could always reconstruct everything, but you don't have playback, you have play forward. It seems to me that we have a situation where there is a fairly broad majority that says we have to reform our judicial system. But the question is how much and how fast. And that is something that I decided in the wake of the ensuing months to try to get a consensus. I'm not sure we'll get one. It's very hard to get one. Because in Israel, the judicial arm has arrogated to itself a lot of the powers of the executive and the legislature, more than any other place on earth. But I don't want to bring it from one side of the pendulum to the other side of the pendulum, where we arrogate from the judicial process to the executive or the legislature powers that we shouldn't. We have to bring it to a happy middle. It's going to be very hard because it's extremely politicized and often misrepresented. I'm doing my best. I don't know if we'll succeed, but I'm...
You're sounding quite downbeat about it.
Yeah, I'm realistic. I'm not downbeat. I'm just realistic, because we have... I'll tell you what we have on our side. We have a captain to the team. That's me. So I can make an unpopular decision, unpopular among my voters, to give it a pause, not to go ahead with everything that we decided, or in fact with anything that we decided. Let's give it a pause. That was unpopular, but I made the decision. On the other side, you have to have some give, some take. Give and take. There's no give, because I'm not sure there's a coherent leadership. It's a fractured opposition that is, I think, not stepping up to the plate, as the Americans say. And I hope it changes. I'm giving it time, but I can't give it infinite time.
The proposed reforms, at least in their original form, were unpopular domestically, but also internationally. I mean, you've taken a real hit for these. If you look at the shekel, I was looking this morning, shekel's down more than 5.5% against the US dollar since you won the election back in November. Investment in the tech sector, one of the prides of Israel, is down 70% Q1 this year compared to last year. Moody's have downgraded your rating from positive to stable. They say it reflects, they've downgraded the outlook for Israel. They say it reflects a deterioration of Israel's governance. Fitch have warned that your A+ rating is at risk. Your personal polls have collapsed.
No, they haven't.
Well, there was a poll around Passover that put one of your opposition rivals, Benny Gantz, on 51% and you on 34%.
Yeah, well, that's not the polls we have, but I don't care about that. We just had a guy...
But the point is, it's been unpopular, not just here where there's been mass demonstrations on the streets, but the Americans have been critical of it, European allies have been critical of it.
You pile it all on. Let me now parse back, take apart a lot of the things you said. The high-tech sector is suffering across the world, and there are 80%, 90% decreases in investments in developed countries. Israel is relatively okay, but everybody is suffering. There's a correction on high-tech that's happening now. Many things are happening, including AI, which we could talk about because that's the next thing that's coming. But that's one thing. The second thing that you say, there hasn't been any downgrading of Israel's credit rating. Our economy is actually, all the commentaries say that our economy is doing actually very well. Our debt to GDP ratio, that's how much debt we have.
They've revised your outlook.
No, they haven't.
Moody's in April revised it from positive to stable.
Well, the outlook is not the rating, number one. It's important to understand Israel's economy is very powerful. It's going to remain powerful because it's a high-tech economy in a high-tech world, and a very able one. And because I led the free market revolution, which turned Israel from a semi-socialist economy to a capitalist economy. So I'm not worried about the
shekel down against the dollar?
Very little. That's not a big change. It actually will strengthen today, but it's not important. You don't.
But it affects people's pockets. It affects how people can spend.
No, I disagree with you. I don't think the economy is the problem. I think political consensus is the problem. There's a vast misrepresentation about what we're doing, and everybody's adding to it. So we're going to take away the independence of the court. No, we're not. I'm not going to let that happen. I said right from the start, after the initial plan was presented, I said we're not going to have a sweeping override capacity of the Knesset, our legislature, against decisions that the court has. The court has sweeping override decisions over what the legislator decides, but I'm not going to correct it by having the opposite. I want to move the pendulum to the center. It's a process. You get maligned, you get criticized, you have to take the heat. And, Harry Truman said two great things. He said, first, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. I've done reforms. I was attacked. I had massive demonstrations for months. I had 5-month labor strike when I made Israel into a free market economy. So I'm used to that. I think we need a correction. I think it's important to make that correction in a balanced way, in a responsible way, so we reestablish the balance that Israel enjoyed in its first 50 years between the various branches of government. But I'm not sure that it's going to be such smooth sailing right away. You have to take the hits. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
Will you put a timeline, a deadline on the compromise talks? Will you put My children will love a dog. Would you put a deadline on the compromise talks? Will you put any sort of timeline on it, or?
No, we're not putting a deadline. They're putting a deadline on it. They're saying, whatever you do the smallest thing. It breaks up it breaks up the talks. And I hope they see their way to finding a mutually agreeable way to proceed. But I just can't promise you it'll happen.
If not, if no compromise is found, it's back to the original proposals as we saw at the start of the year.
Give me time, and let me keep my cards close to my chest. Also, I have to discuss this with my colleagues, as you know.
Can I come on to issues regarding the Palestinians? Figures show that over 7,000 settlement homes have been advanced under your government since the start of the year. These are widely criticised internationally, publicly and privately to you. They contravene international law. You have said in interviews I've seen in the past that it's the Palestinians that are the obstacle to peace. As the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, said this week, it's settlements that are the physical obstacle to peace.
I think that's not true, and it's not new that I disagree with this. I also disagree that it's against international law because there's never been an international decision that says that Jews cannot live in Judea. That's where we come from.
No, but Article 49 of the Geneva Convention says that an occupying force cannot build on the land.
No, it cannot transfer people.
And build on the land.
Transfer people. Build on the land if it's your
disputed, unless it's military.
If it's disputed territory, which it is. You call it occupied. We call it disputed. It's part of our ancestral homeland. I mean, we've only been attached to it for, 3,000 years. King David established our capital here in Jerusalem only 3,000 years ago. We're not the Belgians in the Congo or the Dutch in Indonesia. For God's sake, this is the land of Israel. It's our country. So I completely disagree with that. But I think one thing is true. The Palestinians are here, and we're not going to push them out. We're here, and they're not going to push us out. But that's not the reason that successive governments, were unable to make peace. After all, they were here. They weren't building. They were freezing. They were, 4 or 5 prime ministers who were left of the Likud and left of me, before me and after me, couldn't make peace with the Palestinians. Why? Because the Palestinians, unfortunately, have been commandeered by a leadership that doesn't want peace with Israel. They want a peace without Israel. They don't want a state next to Israel. They want a state instead of Israel. And that is the persistent Palestinian refusal to recognize a Jewish state in any border. On the 1967 border.
Building of settlements.
No, don't run away from what I'm saying, because I'm giving you exactly.
Sure, but if I had your opposite number, Mahmoud Abbas, in front of me, I would obviously scrutinise him.
No, you wouldn't.
And his decisions.
The answer is you wouldn't. I've watched the Western interviews with Abbas, and they're very.
I have not done an interview with him.
But,
you'll have to take my word for it.
I leave you with that challenge.
I obviously have you as the Israeli Prime Minister in front of me, and so it's your decisions that I'm scrutinising. Well, and I mean, look at the United States State Department last week described the building of a yeshiva in Homesh. In the West Bank as violating Israel's commitment to the Biden administration.
It doesn't violate any commitment. That's completely.
That is the U.S. State Department.
Well, it happens to be wrong. I can disagree with them. But the important thing is, what you're saying is that if a Jew buys private land, it buys it, and wants to live in the areas next to the Palestinians, that is a criminal action. We have to sanitize the area. We have to make it ethnically cleansed. If I said to you the Jews cannot buy land anywhere in the world, in London or Paris and so on, you would go and you would be outraged. But the idea here is that private land in disputed areas that have not been determined yet what their political future is, the Jews should not live there because it obstructs the peace? Why? Why do a million Arab citizens of Israel live inside Israel, and we don't say that that's not possible? On the contrary, I think they're allowed to live anywhere. They should have all the civic rights, equal rights. But the idea that Jews will live next to Palestinians, that obviates the peace. I think this conception is the danger to peace. We're going to have to live next to each other. We'll have to find the political arrangement how to do so. But the idea that the presence of Jews in their ancestral homeland, which has been our homeland for the last 3,000 years, the Jews should not live there. It should be Judenrein, Jew-free. I think that's the obstacle to peace.
Let me talk about what you describe as trying to build a circle of peace, which is normalization with other countries in the region. There's a lot of talk that negotiations are going on with Saudi Arabia at the moment. Do you believe a normalization deal is close with Riyadh?
Well, I certainly hope so, but I can't guarantee it. I mean, it's up to the Saudis. Our hand is extended to all Arab states, and certainly to Saudi Arabia, which is
what would you say to
vitally
Mohammed bin
important.
Salman, the Crown Prince? If Sky News is watched widely throughout the Middle East, what would your message be to him?
Well, I think that we have great opportunities to advance the peace in our region, peace between our two countries, the well-being of our peoples. But I think it would change history. I mean, we have already made one historic turning point with the four peace treaties of the Abraham Accords, which Israel made under my leadership with UAE, United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco, and with Sudan. Obviously, Saudi Arabia would be a quantum leap forward because it's the most influential Arab country, not only in the Arab world, I think also in the Muslim world. So it would fashion, I think, the possibility of ending the Arab-Israeli conflict. And I think that would also help us solve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, because the Palestinians are only 2% of the Arab world. The reason their leadership has been resistant to accepting the idea of a Jewish state is they said, well, we have all the Arab world, we'll overcome Israel one day. When they see that the Arab world has made its peace with Israel, I think there'll be a turning point also in the Palestinian polity. But I think working outside in is probably has a better chance of getting peace with the Palestinians than trying to bust through the Palestinians to the Arab world.
But in a word, you're getting closer to a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia.
I think it's too early to tell, but I can tell you that it's one of the great goals that I set for myself coming back to office. That is to make peace with Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Arab world, and also to block Iran. By the way, the two are interrelated.
We'll come on to Iran, but first I just want to talk about the makeup of your current government, which has attracted, as you know, considerable controversy around the world. You appointed a new advisor this week who has tweeted in the past that Joe Biden is unfit for office and he is slowly but surely ruining America. Is that a sentiment that you agree with?
No, and he has himself said that these are views that he held as a private journalist, and that he has since changed his views. Okay. Otherwise, he wouldn't be working for me. And aside from everything else, I think Joe Biden is a great friend of Israel. And he's the president of the United States of America, and we work with him as we work with other presidents. And we have confidence in the choices that America makes. By the way, the alliance between America and Israel has never been stronger. The security cooperation,
you still
the
have an invitation
intelligence
to the White House,
cooperation.
though.
Sorry?
You still haven't had an invitation to the White House?
Yes, I think it'll come. But I think that you should listen also to what both the President and the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense and Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, have said. The ironclad alliance is exactly that. It's ironclad. And it will continue to be that. Let
me just quickly go through, because we're short on time. Your finance minister, a senior figure in your government, said that Hawara should be wiped out. He described the Palestinian people as an invention, and he's been recorded as saying he's a fascist homophobe. Do you agree with any of those statements? No, and he himself, again, said that he was taken out of context, or he simply was quoted wrong. But in any case, I think he understands that he joined my government, I didn't join his. And people follow our policies, and our policies are responsible. Okay, one of your MPs in your party. And very strong, and I don't control every MP. One of the politicians in your party recently said there are parents who encourage their children to be LGBTQ+. They give a boy a doll because it seems to them he should be gay. Yes. It's a homophobic statement. Again, I mean, I ask you again, do you agree with that? Do you agree with that?
The homophobic lie is particularly ridiculous. Why? Because the Likud is presented as this illiberal party, and we're this neo-fascist, whatever they call us. Okay, it's ridiculous. Now, here's how it's ridiculous. The Likud has a very active gay cell. The leader of that gay cell happens to be a Likud Knesset member whom I nominated to be the Speaker of the Knesset. And he won overwhelmingly across the board from every Likud member and every one of the members of my illiberal, quote, coalition. How come? Does anybody know that? Does your audience know that? So they're trying to paint us as anti-LGBT. Yeah, you can have one Knesset member who has those views, or two even. But the vast majority have followed my lead. They joined our coalition. We didn't join theirs.
Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Interior Minister, again a very senior minister, recently visited Al-Aqsa compound, Temple Mount, said, we're in charge here. We're making changes slowly and quietly. I mean, that is an incredibly incendiary comment to Muslims, to Palestinians. And the point is that these individuals, whether they said this in the past or recently, they are all part of your government in some form, as ministers or as advisors. Yeah. And this is how the world and world governments views your government. And when your finance minister goes to Washington, as he didn't get any meetings with the US administrations because they don't want to deal with him. The European Union, cancelled an event in Tel Aviv recently because they didn't want Ben-Gvir to talk of this. And you have a problem, do you not, that a lot of allies of yours don't want to engage with major players of your cabinet?
I think there's an adjustment period, both for the members of the government and those who are, and for other governments with us. The one thing they have to understand is that we control policy and we guide it. For example, on the Temple Mount, the status quo, sacrosanct. We're not changing it. I don't care what anybody says. We're keeping the status quo. And ultimately, over time, people judge it, and they see it hasn't changed and won't change. Because the idea that, and in fact, it's an idea that has only been possible under Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem, is that all three faiths have free and unfettered access to the Temple Mount, or to this Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where you have basically the holy sites of the three main monotheistic faiths. And that's going to be there. That's I would say, a rigid, unchanging principle that I'm upholding, and so will my ministers. I don't care where they come from. So, people say things, people respond to things people said, but look at what we do. And what we do is responsible and careful and measured. I don't want an escalation of tensions. I want to de-escalate tensions as far as we can. And I want to expand the circle of peace. And I think we can do that for the benefit of everyone. Israelis, Arabs, Palestinians, everybody.
This week, Iran unveiled what it says is a hypersonic missile that could hit Israel within 400 seconds. Now, I don't think we've seen any public evidence of this missile. Do you believe that they now have that capability?
Well, we're monitoring their capabilities, and I think whatever they have, we can deal with.
Your defense minister recently said that the threat from Iran is intensifying and Israel may have to react. The US Secretary of State, to bring up again, said recently, we continue to believe diplomacy is the best way to verifiably, effectively and sustainably prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, which was, clearly a message to you and to Israel. Are there any circumstances where you'd ever consider talking to Iran?
I don't know what I'm going to talk to them about. If somebody says, we're going to decapitate you, what will I talk about? The method of our decapitation? We're going to destroy you, the method of our destruction. I mean, Iran is openly committed to destroying repeating the Holocaust and destroying the 6 or 7 million Jews of Israel. And we're not going to sit idly by and let them do it. And also, I don't think that diplomacy by itself will work. I think diplomacy can only work if it's coupled with a credible military threat, or the willingness to apply that, the military option, if deterrence fails. It's just no way to stop any other country. This is how Saddam Hussein was stopped from building a nuclear weapon. This is how Syria was stopped from building a nuclear weapon. This is how Gaddafi was stopped, not by an action, but the threat of action. But there are two countries left. One, North Korea. There was no threat and wasn't stopped. And you talk to them all over the place. 3 Americans, more American governments had diplomacy with them, didn't help one bit. And Iran, well, Iran is, we've delayed them by actions that, among other things, that I authorized in my terms of government. But while we set them back at least 10 years, we didn't stop them. And they're progressively moving forward, and that's the danger. The real danger is that a radical Islamic regime will acquire nuclear weapons, and everybody will be in their sights, including Britain.
They're getting closer. Are you on the cusp of a preemptive strike? There is a lot of talk at the moment that you are getting closer to having to take military action.
Well, we'll do whatever we need to do to defend ourselves, but I'm not going to get into any greater detail. And by the way, whatever agreements are made, JCPOA or by other countries with Iran, that doesn't oblige us. If they're saying that they're going to destroy us, end Jewish history after 3,000 years, 3,500 years of toiling under the sun, rebuilding our homeland, reestablishing our national life here, and these Ayatollahs think that they could threaten us with a nuclear holocaust, they're wrong. We'll do whatever we need to do to defend ourselves.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.